We've got a great panel here today. I'm very happy to have everyone join us for this discussion, which is going to be heady with lots of different topics. To introduce everyone very briefly so we can get right into the discussion, immediately to my left is Catherine Badalamente, VP of Digital Media from the Graham Media Group. To her left is Lou Blanchette, a system architect with Snell Advanced Media, followed by Joe Fiveash, EVP of Digital and Strategy from Raycom Media, Tony Katsur, the SVP of Platforms from Nexstar Media Group, and finally Frank Mungeam, VP of Digital Content from TEGNA. So I want to start with a hard question rather than something soft, and let's get into the things we are tough to talk about first, digital revenue. And I want to do a roll call with each of the four digital chiefs to begin with. Digital revenue has long been in the basement as a percentage of broadcasters' overall revenue, the low to middle single digits very often. So let me hear from the four of you first. What is that percentage for you right now? And what, if anything, is changing in the picture? Let me start with Catherine.
I think you ask me that question a lot.
I do, every day.
So we have our overall percentage is still not as high as it should be. I think I told you probably 3 years ago that we wanted to get in the 10 to 15% range. We are with some of our markets in that range, which and they're big markets. They're markets where we're pulling a lot of money out. And so we know that it's possible. We just have some that are lagging behind. So I think that my overall number is between 5 and 10%.
And anything changed in monetization prospects that's come along that's got your attention?
The monetization prospects, we have, I think that now looking at all of the new platforms, especially on the video side, it's helping to make our case a little bit easier with some traditional people. They're really eager to buy our video, which has not been the case in the past. So it's sort of opening new doors for some of the traditional TV buyers that we haven't had in the past.
And we're going to go a lot more specifically into that. Okay, so next, Joe, what are we talking here?
We're in the same range as Catherine. I'd say sort of, bumping up against 10%, but that only includes the TV stations. So we've made one large acquisition and a couple of smaller ones that would change that number very significantly. But I think we're probably about where everybody else is on the television station side.
Okay, Tony?
Yeah, we have about 10% in Q3. We did about 612 million in revenues. Out of that 612, about 56.2 was digital. So we hover around the 10% range.
Okay, Frank?
Yeah, I think we're all, sounds like, in the same range. The thing that's, I'd say, exciting for us at TEGNA this year in digital is, digital is O&O versus new digital products. So Premion for us has been a great new product, ability to direct sell OTT, and so there's opportunities for new revenue streams of digital that we're excited about.
Okay, so we have a baseline. So let's talk prospects a little bit more specifically then. The most promising things that each of you are seeing that are going to raise that baseline above the 10% mark, move into the healthy double digits. What, if anything, is coming along?
We'd go in reverse order. The things that we're excited about, and there's a reason that content is in my title, so I don't want to get over my skis, but really our strategy is based on stronger content first, and so creating digital original verticals. This year we launched Heart Threads, which is made for platform short form videos that celebrate the best stories about the best in us, and it's been a really quick path to success in terms of audience acquisition. So, we're looking to match a sponsor who wants to be associated with that kind of content. So original digital verticals, and then e-commerce. And anybody in the audience who was on their phone over the Black Friday holiday weekend, you've got the New York Times doing guide shopping pieces that have an e-commerce component, right? So these are spaces we didn't really play in that way as broadcasters. So I think there are some opportunities on the immediate horizon that are interesting.
And Lou, in preparing for this, you told me that there are some commonly untapped monetization channels.
Yeah, as we're looking at this today, you can take your material and you've got all of these pieces coming in, and you've got the prospect of being able to put it into multiple platforms. But in order to do that, you need to have automated workflows that will allow a single producer to go through and create one item and then be able to rebrand it and change it in an automated workflow that re-edits it for you automatically so that it looks differently for the different platforms as you see fit, so that you can reuse the same content over and over without having to drive up your costs and having 17 people re-editing this. Have an automated workflow do that kind of work for you. And you can also take that and rebrand things automatically in the background to be able to take all of that material and monetize it in different ways. So it becomes a game of trying to figure out how to take existing pieces and using automation to drive revenue.
So we're going to come back to monetization again, but I want to flip to technology with another roll call question for the 4 digital chiefs. And I'd like each of you to name one of the many newsroom technologies that you have that have become indispensable to you and why. And then I'd also like you to name one technical pain point that you still see unresolved and that you'd like to see the marketplace or either building it internally or have the marketplace fix or speak to. So let's again take it with Catherine first.
Something that's indispensable. Well, social news desk, of course, is part of our company, and anything that allows us to be able to have a management of a process is really important. I think that when we're looking at going forward too, I mean, do you want me to talk about too what we're really working on in terms of fixing? So, our video process has been painful. So for the end users, for the content producers, you're talking about newsroom automation, we know that we have to fix that. So we're doing a complete video overhaul this year so that when they're trying to get, especially when we're talking about live stream and live content, sort of the content that we do really, really well, that they can do it with ease of use. And so a big portion of what we're focusing on this year is that we're actually working with a bunch of new vendors, frankly, completely scrapping all of the vendors that we had, signed up a year ago, and are starting that process right now because we feel like that is something that absolutely has to be solved immediately. And we know that our audience eats up our live video, so we need to be able to distribute it in the easiest and fastest way possible.
Okay, so Joe, how about you? What do you love and what's giving you pain?
Sure. There's probably going to be somewhat of a theme that's going to come out of all this on the monetization or content side, which is video. So on the what do we love, Videolicious is something that out at the sort of last mile we've been very successful with and has enabled us to create content that we couldn't create before. But it sort of leads right into the bottleneck and problem, which is it's still very manual to get that kind of content into the sort of broadcast CMS environment and use it across platform. So there are lots of new video solutions out there. We're really active in looking at them as well on the sort of Uber level because I'm not sure anybody's solved the issue of how do you create video content in a very distributed way and then distribute it across platforms easily.
Okay. How about you, Tony?
I think to pick up on what Joe and Catherine were saying, I think there are 3 key components that will establish the future of the newsroom. I think CMS is the ultimate hub and a hub and spoke system that will automate the flow of news and information to your audience. That CMS needs to be multi-channel and multi-format. So multi-channel being it needs to be able to distribute it over app, whether that be OTT or device. And multi-format meaning that content needs to be distributed either contextually, right? Content will read or content will consume visually, so video content. So I think the CMS becomes kind of the hub of a larger spoke. I think the second part of that spoke is data. Advertising is becoming increasingly data-driven, certainly by the national brands that many of us work with, but a lot of our customers are Nexstar 66,000 SMB clients that we have across the country. Like that data awareness, that knowledge around data, that better understanding of your consumer will pervade that market as well over the coming years. So we need to guard ourselves and be prepared with data-driven sales propositions to those clients. And then I think the third component is monetization. I think that is really the hub and spoke model of a new media operating system.
Okay, Frank?
Yeah, like social news desk and Videolicious as well. So I'll try to add a different one. I would say most indispensable for us is CrowdTangle because of the way we use it to listen to conversations in our communities and discover the conversations that are relevant and tailor our journalism process from the beginning based on social listening. So, everyone says data, we want more data. It's really what you do with the data. I feel like CrowdTangle enables us to be smart with data and make better editorial decisions. Pain point is actually pretty easy, and Katsur touched on this. I think as broadcasters, and I came up on the broadcast side, we're like, live, that's what we're good at. And when Facebook Live came out, there were probably some broadcasters thought, well, hello, we've been doing that for X decades. But the reality is we've been doing one-way live. And so, to me, the pain point, but the huge business opportunity, hint, product developers, is digital live streaming, studio in a box with high levels of interactivity and engagement. I should be able to do polling seamlessly, comments, comment moderation, multiple inputs, serve multiple platform outputs, back to your hub and spoke, right? Facebook Live, Periscope, YouTube, why we should be able to be somewhat agnostic on the distribution end, and that should be turnkey. And then the monetization parts get really interesting too when you're delivering something that's not a one-way stream, but truly two-way and interactive. So we're very interested, hint, hint, in seeing who's got smart solutions to that.
So vendors in the room, you've heard it, and Lou, you've heard some pain here. What's on the horizon? What's coming along to help them?
There's some serious pain points here to be able to do all those things, and a lot of this, it's not only that you have to do all these things, but now we're trying to push this farther out into the field. We're not asking to do this inside of the building of the station anymore. Now we say we want to do all of these things, we want to have all these workflows, and we want to push them out in the field and have the producers be able to make decisions out in the field to be able to push things to different people. Well, traditionally you've always had to have some sort of physical hardware editing kind of pieces to get those to go. But if we can move that technology into platforms like HTML5, where we can do things that are web-based and have all of your materials available to everyone, be able to take the materials, cut it up and do it without having to have installed software, without having to have people in the right places, and then launch workflows from that based on the content that people are seeing, then you can be able to start to be able to do this in a more efficient fashion. So really, tools that are coming today are more web-based instead of physically stashed hardware, and that's going to help integrate these things together, because now we can take an HTML5 element from company A and plug it into company B so that you can have these two elements operating together, so that you can have a producer producing for multiple channels, launch the workflows that are in there, and go back and collect the data that they're getting back in and combine that back together. And it's only systems that are working in common environments like HTML5 that will allow you to do that.
So social has already been trickling in a little to this discussion. It's become a cornerstone for nearly every broadcaster at this point. So I wanted to start a discussion around social with Facebook, which is a platform with which everyone here has a deeply interwoven relationship. You all have a limited amount of resources and time that you can devote to any outside platform, but Facebook seems to command so much of that. So and anyone can jump in on this. How are you seeing an ROI on Facebook based on what you're committing to it resource-wise?
We're not seeing an ROI on
Really?
Facebook. I mean, I don't want to speak for all of you. We're not seeing an ROI on Facebook. I think that I look at it from, I think it helps actually to drive decisions that we make. Because of that, we have to sort of weigh our limited resources and say, where are we going to put our efforts? And my challenge to our team all the time is, let's try to figure out a way where we're less dependent on Facebook. Let's try to figure out a way where our value to the audience is more a one-to-one relationship with us, and that Facebook, while we're going to continue to foster that relationship and understand how important it is, we're going to put more effort towards finding our own way. Because I can't control what Facebook does. And I think that any of us that are going to, I've heard stories from people that talk about 60% of their digital audience is being driven from Facebook referrals. If that is what my audience is, I would be panicked right now, because every day it is, changing. And it's less about, our relationship with Facebook is one where we just have to understand that they have a business to run, and that we're one part of a big business, and that we need to figure out our own path forward without them, and hopefully that they're going to play a component but not be our everything.
Is Catherine's experience unique here?
I would say, I agree with her. ROI is an interesting thing to define. When you think about what if from day one you'd never done anything with Facebook, where would you be today? And then compare that to where we are now. To me, if you do that mentally, it's hard to say there hasn't been some form of ROI. I mean, if I in preparation for this panel, I asked the stations, how much effort are we putting into Facebook? Because honestly, I didn't know. And the answer that came back was approximately 1 FTE worth of time, but it's from a bunch of different people. And so I don't think that we're doing anything on Facebook that is taking away from what we do on other platforms. And I think the education and sort of mindset change that comes from producing for Facebook is really valuable. Can we prove an ROI on that 1 FTE? Absolutely not. Every once in a while we can work really hard and get ratings up for XYZ television show, and we do believe that we can get ratings up using Facebook, but it's not something we do all day, every day, and could probably do in a more mechanized way. But I think you just have to be there from a branding standpoint, from a distribution standpoint. It gets much trickier. But if I define the question as, is that something we should be doing, and therefore has an ROI rather than input output, I would say yes, you have to, because it's a gateway drug for a lot of other things we need to be doing too.
Frank, you have a lament about monetization limitations, pre-roll ads and mid-roll ads, et cetera. You want to speak to that?
I probably express a lament for every publisher who does video. But to start with your original question, I think the latest Pew, it's like 2 months ago. This is really recent data. The latest Pew is 66% of U.S. adults are on Facebook, 45% get news from Facebook. Fish where the fish are, right? I mean, everyone in the room knows what the ratings look like for an individual 5 o'clock news. So Facebook has built a business and is in business and provides value on their platform. I think for us, the business challenge is to be just as smart. And where are the opportunities to work with Facebook to advance our journalism and business goals? And I think for us, that's 3 things, and monetization is one part of that. Instant articles for us works, and we are fully in on instant articles.
Which a lot of publishers say doesn't work.
Right, and if you're a newspaper, legacy newspaper publisher, dependent on subscriptions, I can see how that does not work in a paywalled world, but that's not true for us, so that product works for us, and we have a dynamic conversation ongoing with Facebook about products, right? For many of us in the room doing video, it's really challenging, right? And so we hold back. We don't put our premium video natively on Facebook because we don't see a monetization solution yet. I mean, YouTube is a better solution for us there. But I would say the other, given where the audience is, there are also other ways to work with Facebook that are a win for everybody. I mean, we have not had, as broadcasters, a good return path from the audience. And I think the conversations that we're able to have on Facebook Live, while in many ways, it got used as a shiny object, not really to advance journalism. One great value of Facebook Live is the return path and real-time conversations with the audience. So we see it as a place where we can build our brand, a place where we can selectively monetize and increase the traffic on platform for our content, but especially as a place to connect and listen to our audience.
So Campbell Brown was here yesterday touting the Facebook Journalism Project almost a year in. Has that moved the needle for any of you? Have you felt that, do you feel a more collaborative spirit from them? Is it meaningful, that journalism project, or is it just something more less so? Anybody can jump in on this, if you've worked with them on this particularly.
I mean, I see a big difference, Mike and I were talking today, I see a big difference from a year ago in terms of being involved in the conversation about what are the next products to develop, what are the pain points, what are the problems to be solved. I think that YouTube has a very effective way of delivering a lean-back video experience, and I think we're all looking for that kind of a solution from Facebook, and it's not there yet.
But as you're looking at this, one of the things I keep hearing is everyone's sort of coming at this as, well, we need to do this. There's not a great deal of thrust going forward. And when you're looking at a return on investment of something that you have to do and you're obligated to do it, you really have to drive down your cost. And to drive down your cost, maybe the best thing you can look at is trying to figure out the number of ways that you can take all of these pieces and automate more of it to get less people having to do less work, and to use common workflows to brand your video that gets out there so that when someone's watching it, they get your logo. It will hopefully drive them back to your station for that, but it's about driving your costs down, and automation can do that.
At the risk of extending this, I'd be interested in hearing from the other panelists, working backwards from the audience, which I think all our strategies ultimately have to do, because no audience, no monetization. What is the limit to automation? Because what we see, and I love the topic that pulled me in was the multi-platform jungle, is telling a great Instagram story is a different workflow than a great Facebook native video, is a different workflow than a 4-minute YouTube story, which must be much more personal, probably a shorter lens focus than a broadcast narrative compelling story. And so automation has its place, but for platform specific storytelling works better than automated recuts, and that's a resource challenge, at least for us.
Absolutely.
And how sustainable, I asked Michael Gelman that before about his different channels that he has to produce for. How sustainable is that diversification, especially as more platforms keep coming along that suddenly you have to be represented on and demand bespoke content?
I think it's sustainable. In my opinion, it comes back to the content management system. I think and the CMSs by no means have evolved to support this multi-platform, multi-channel world today, but there does need to be investment and evolution in those platforms to support multi-channel, multi-platform publishing. So it is the concept of, I'm not necessarily write once, publish everywhere. There's still going to be, you're still going to have to cut something maybe specific for Instagram, for Facebook, for Twitter. Maybe you're even publishing on LinkedIn. You're publishing things out to OTT apps as well as mobile devices. But I think the content management system has to be that hub that gives you that flexibility and streamlines that workflow to be able to push out to those multiple channels simultaneously. I don't think any of them are there today, whether they are homegrown or commercial.
Let me ask, I'm sorry, one more subset question of Facebook. Frank, you just described Facebook Live as a shiny new object, or having kind of that characteristic initially. I know a lot of newsrooms anecdotally went heavily in that, producing a lot of material there. Is it a shiny new object, or has it become something meaningful? Has it become something game-changing? How significant is that subset of Facebook emerging? I know a lot of newsrooms use it, for instance, behind the scenes, or to do kind of adjuncts of the center story that they produce. How important is that platform?
For us, I would say it's more in the shiny new object category. I mean, we've actually done some interesting ad sales things with it, but that's sort of tends to be shiny new object oriented. In some ways, to me, the central issue is how do we actually get paid for this? Because if we do, then all the problems with having a different person for Instagram, for Facebook Live, et cetera, go away. Obviously, as we all know, we're trying to solve two simultaneous problems. One is how do you get users, and then how do you get ad dollars? And the closer we are to being able to sell advertisers on a television-like experience from digital with sort of benefits of digital targeting, et cetera, to me, that's sort of the low-hanging fruit, because we can all drive ourselves crazy doing everything with everybody and never get there. But if we're trying to solve the monetization problem, one aspect of that is how do you get people that are already spending lots and lots of money with you to spend more? And to me, that's a good focus to think about this problem with.
I think the place that we've used Facebook Live most effectively is around live programming. Big events, they have a Thanksgiving Day parade in Detroit, and they were Facebook Living, all kinds of behind the scenes and everything else. It drove I mean, we're convinced that that was one of the reasons why our ratings were up significantly year over year. And that's just because right now Facebook Live is a great mechanism when we go live to let the audience know that we're there, and then it drove people to the TV station. And so, in terms of ratings where we can actually make a lot more money off of our product next year, it actually had probably the best ROI that we could actually ever look at, was being able to see the long tail of it driving people to TV. And I've heard, at first I was adamantly against doing something like that, especially even if we were taking the actual programming and putting it on Facebook. But we've heard from a number of different broadcasters that when they're having those big events, going on Facebook Live with the long form programming is actually helping their TV numbers in the end.
Now, it emerged when we were preparing for this panel that YouTube has become a very viable, very collaborative platform for at least you, Catherine, and Frank. Catherine, can you speak to this first? Like, characterize your relationship over the past year and why you've gravitated to them?
They're really working with us in, you used the right word, collaborative way. We spend a lot of time with our YouTube team, our Google team, talking about what our plans are for the year, what we're trying to accomplish, and then they actually put lots of resources behind it. Probably the biggest thing, which I know a few of us are working on, is the YouTube player for publishers, where we're actually taking the YouTube player, and that's going to be our main player on our sites. Feeling like that is going to allow us to stay ahead of the pack when it comes to having the best video experience. That project has led to a number of other projects. We're working with them on improving our mobile page speed, and they've dedicated developers to work with our team for months that are only working with our team. So it's that kind of...
Can Facebook say that?
No.
Yet?
So I mean, and that's the difference, is that the Facebook team, the Facebook Journalism Project, while I'm happy that they're there, we didn't have anything prior to them being there, so a lot of these conversations weren't happening. It's still a small team, and they're still trying to weigh, what they can do and how they can work with us. The difference with the Google team is that they're literally taking people from within their organization and assigning them to help us come up with the solution together. That speaks a lot.
Frank, what was your positive experience?
Yeah, it's similar. I think at TEGNA we have a similar collaborative relationship with both Facebook and YouTube. The specific difference is that YouTube's video solution and strengths are a better immediate match for our broadcast problems. And so, we've had a similar kind of support relationship in terms of onboarding 100% of our stations with all of our content, news partnership now with YouTube. So there's a monetization path, that will get only better. The immediate return for us has been, as we work to be more platform specific, right? It isn't just dump your TV stories on YouTube. That doesn't work. But our #1 demo for TEGNA 6 months in on YouTube is men 18 to 34. And I don't know any local broadcasters who have men 18 to 34 as any kind of a demo watching our newscasts. So for us, it's additive. It's getting extended ROI. I mean, the sunk cost of telling stories has already happened. And so to get in front of new audiences with that storytelling is huge. And then, I think we see a path to significantly improving monetization of video going forward. And let's just admit, YouTube is best in class at surfacing related video to users once they're there. I can't be the only person in the room who goes onto YouTube intending to watch one 4-minute video, and an hour later, I'm like, I've got to go to bed. And so, let's make that work for us. Video storytelling is our strength.
I want to move to OTT. First of all, just to kind of gauge from all of you, how important of a platform has that emerged to be in the last year or so? Is indispensable a fair word to say yet?
And when you say OTT, you mean our own apps, Apple.
And your
Amazon.
representation on other roll-up apps, skinny bundles.
Right.
I'd conflate it all together in the question.
Yeah, at least for Raycom, I would say it's still a very small number relative to mobile, desktop, et cetera. But I think it's really important because I think it's got all the hallmarks of something that is a direct relationship. In the panel that was up here before, everybody talked about the future being a bunch of multiple relationships with known people and one-to-one, and the whole one-to-one thing has been around for 25 years. And in OTT, I think we can actually have that. And I think OTT is a precursor to 3.0. And by doing things on OTT, we can sort of practice for 3.0. And so I think it's really important from a strategic standpoint.
Yeah, I agree with Joe. I wholeheartedly agree with you. But I also think it's still nascent. It's still early. So to call it indispensable at this point, I just think it's too early in the OTT game. There still isn't necessarily, there's adoption. It's growing. Adoption is growing aggressively, but I don't think it's achieved critical mass where I would call it indispensable. Do I think it's going to be a cornerstone of the future television? Absolutely.
And what about your audience there? What do we know about who they are and how they behave? What do they gravitate to?
TEGNA launched on Roku 3 years ago. We've been on that platform. And I think the surprise for me, because I'm a heavy OTT user, is that it's time shifting for me and I can watch what I want when I want it on demand. We've been surprised at how much live streaming viewing happens on our OTT channel, so that was the big surprise. To the earlier question, I would say it's strategically indispensable, although today the audience is small. It is absolutely the things that we're all doing today to be represented in the skinny bundles, to have some of the workflow efficiencies you describe. So on the atomic unit of news, the story is available on whatever device and platform the audience chooses, fast and easy, the way they want it. We've got to do, the plumbing has to go in for the house to work later. So the house is still pretty empty, but this is the essential work for that future.
Anecdotally, what I've heard from stations in writing about this is that live and linear are where the audience is heavily shifting on OTT. Do you all find that to be the case as opposed to on demand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that mean that on demand is an afterthought, or do you still have to have it even though fewer are there? Do you have to have this? Some stations throw everything at the wall for on demand.
I think we have to figure out what that on-demand product is. I think right now our product doesn't work. It is all about the live linear. And I think that that's what YouTube, frankly, YouTube TV learned, was that when they created their YouTube TV product, that everyone wanted live linear news, and then we became very valuable in that equation. What everyone's talking about is it's live news and sports, and that's what's driving all of the viewing right now. We just haven't figured out the right product for the on-demand part.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're. I mentioned the Heart Threads initiative that we started this year. That's where, if we can get out of, we are broadcasters who do news, newscasts, and think of we are storytellers who deliver great experiences on the platform you choose when and where you want it. That leads us to begin with the end in mind and create different kinds of content, and that's the gift of digital, right? Is we're
original
not bound,
content.
yes, original, and we're not bound by the format and formula of a 30-minute newscast.
And I'm glad you brought up sports. I think WREL does like a high school football game during the season. They have that they don't run on the air, and they've got the whole game there. Do we original content production? Do we see a lot more of that coming in the next year? And is sports a key area for that for OTT?
I think sports is a key area, but I would take it in a little bit different direction. I think to do everything we're talking about doing without any kind of subscription or paid, content revenue stream is going to be really hard. And maybe I'm jumping ahead. So
No, you actually teed up the next question.
When we get to it, but the world is our oyster in terms of what we can do. There's so many cool things, so many good stories on great platforms with functionality we never had before, but it's hard for me to imagine any time relatively soon that all that's going to get paid for with advertising. And as we sift through all the different things that are possible to do, it seems to me one of the things we ought to be really thinking about hard is how can we get some kind of beachhead on some sort of paid content platform, because and I think done the right way, it's possible, because I think we are creating enough value for people to feel good about paying for it. But obviously, we live in a world of everything's free, and that's a very risky move, and there are a lot of problems associated with that too. But I mean, as I think about sort of the overall key issues to think about over the next year or two, getting some form of paid revenue stream for our content, and not all of it. I mean, certainly not all of it, but some sort of freemium model that actually works for consumers and that we can build off of, it seems like a really important thing.
And it is nascent, given that, but on the monetization front, people are trying things. Has anybody seen anything that works? Any kind of model? Native advertising, for instance, is it more successful there? Or have you not seen any ROI yet?
I don't think there's enough scale to prove out those theses, but I agree 100% with Joe. And if you take a hint from what's happening in the pure digital players, the erection of paywalls, I think the commercials need to better translate from traditional television into this new digital ecosystem we live in, and it can't be 100% ad supported.
I want to make a complete directional shift here to a different platform, to voice, which came up yesterday as well. The vanguard of voice being Amazon and Google and Apple with its product next year, the speaker in the home. It may develop into any number of things in the next couple of years. But right now, how important is this platform, and what do you see its horizon potential to be for broadcasters?
Well, we think it's important for us to be there. We're seeing so much. It's the biggest gift of the year. People are going to have these devices in their house, and the people who are using them too are also an audience that sometimes right now is skewing younger, and we have an opportunity to kind of talk to them in a place where we and have a conversation with them in a way that hopefully kind of, we look at it as being complementary to our overall product. So it's not going to be the end product, but it's going to hopefully complement our overall product, and that we can learn from it. We have now developed apps in every one of our markets, or skills for every one of our markets, for Echo and Echo Show. I think that we know that the content has to get better. Right now, it's really just short news briefs. We know that we have to create, again, content that's original for that, because it's not just taking our current product and just throwing it on there. But I think that we see this as being emerging and something that we need to be a part of, and that we have to be where the audience is again. And hopefully we find a way that helps complement our bigger product, and that they all work together.
I was at the IAB video board meeting Q4 video board meeting last week, and this topic came up from one of the large holding companies. And again, not to sound like a broken record, I think it's early. The feedback we're hearing from agencies and brands is that they want to understand what the opportunity is in voice, and I don't think anyone quite understands what that is. I do think there's opportunity in the form of content and creative. I think that we will have to adapt to that. I'm wondering aloud if there is a data opportunity here. The concern, though, is that if you look who is essentially controlling the voice of the home, it's really 2, maybe 3 companies, right? Google, Amazon. There may be a third player there. So
Apple pushed its product back.
That's right.
It wasn't ready yet. So.
That's right. Apple's not ready. So Apple could be the dark horse and be the third player. Where that data is concentrated, as content producers, what access will we have to that data in voice? But again, I think it's very early. Marketers are inquisitive, but they're not quite sure what to do with it yet as well.
Yeah, TEGNA has the flash briefings as well, so it's a space we need to be in. But the audience today is even smaller than some of the other audiences we've been talking about. Back to the jungle, right? Today the reason for us to be there is to learn how to storytell in a voice-driven world. It's quite possible that one day we'll wake up and voice will be the new click. And if you think of how we navigate for information and how the click became, the way of getting information instead of a passive receiver, watching television, listening to the radio, reading, the transition to click was transformative in how we tell stories and how technology is a means to storytelling. And so, I think it's fair to say that The transition of voice will be equally disruptive, and many of the things we think we know about storytelling will have to be rethought, but that is probably a day in the future. And today our challenges really are much more around how do we actually fund, how do we find sustainable business models for all these choices we have about how to use our storytelling skills.
Well, media was on the back foot for that first click. It wasn't there, and it was always chasing behind digital from that point forward. And so some people are very adamant you need to be here as an industry with the technology platforms while there's still that opportunity. Is that a valid concern? I mean, is this really, if we move a computational interface from keyboards to voice and media is not there to facilitate, to be part of that conversation as it's happening on the tech side, is that a worry?
I'd say it's a conundrum because it's very expensive to be early, to be part of the small group that's figuring it out when, I mean, it's like VHS and beta when the thing cost $1,000 and was terrible. So do you really want to be the guy with the $1,000 Betamax machine when your margins are challenging? I mean, it is really ripe for partnership, I think, for broadcasters to work in partnership with the disruptors and the startups. It's a very expensive place to be on the adoption curve.
Agreed.
Before I go to audience questions, I just a couple of brief, or one or two brief investment questions for you, and anyone can jump into this. What's guiding your M&A strategy or your startup efforts on the digital front? What are you focusing on? And actually, I'd like to start with Tony and then Joe, please.
Sure. So I don't think it's any secret for people that have been following the trades the past week or so. We announced our acquisition of Liquid Technologies based out of Orange County, California. And this really feeds into the guiding thesis of Nexstar broadcast evolution into digital. What we liked about that acquisition is their strength in digital video, both in the form of ad serving, video player capabilities, monetization, DMP capabilities around it. So it really kind of talks about that, speaks to that hub and spoke concept that I was speaking about earlier. By no means is that a holistic solution, but it is a great cornerstone digital asset to own, given our heritage in video that we can then bolt onto our other portfolio companies that we currently own in digital. And we're constantly looking at other opportunities to evolve in the digital space. This is one. We're looking at others. We're entertaining others as well.
Joe?
I think it's good that everybody's got different approaches to how to do that. I think that's one of the biggest questions, is how do you approach startups and acquisitions, and what are your filters and criteria? We have different ones. We did a startup along the lines of what Frank was talking about, called the Southern Weekend, which is multi-platform video, digital from the ground up, and then have sort of evolved that or added to it what we call City Weekends, which is a version of it for every market. And that is, how do you tell stories and how do you do video native advertising? And that's been a really nice surprise. We can grow audience, and the advertisers are thrilled with the sort of video native piece of it where you're creating video for them. So that's on the content side. And then we bought a company called Pure Cars, which is a large national company that serves car dealers, which obviously is one of the biggest categories on broadcast and on digital. And they have a level of technology that we could never really aspire to as a group of television stations. And so I mean, to me, it's content plays and aggregation of content against specific audiences. And then it's also, there are these local digital marketing niches that are huge, and they are where a lot of the money is across platform, whether it's cars or health or legal or whatever. And so we're looking actively at that as well.
Okay, I want to see if anyone out there has a question. I've got more, but if anybody wants to jump in, we have a microphone. There in the front.
Hi, quick Quick question. I think it was answered by one, but from the multi-platform storytelling, planning, going through the whole process itself, anybody seeing any tools? I know one gentleman next door mentioned you're not seeing any tools at all yet. Just curious.
As I mentioned earlier, our acquisition of Liquid we find complementary to our existing digital portfolio. One company we own is called Lacana, which is a content management system that we are continuing to invest in and evolve to provide that tool set. There are companies out there that I think make up components of the tool set that we would consider, bolting on in the form of, partnership, potentially acquisition, or we may build some of those features in-house. But I do think that CMS is the hub that needs to be invested in to support that multi-format, multi-channel distribution. And we're going to continue to invest in that in our Lacana asset. And we think Liquid's very complementary to that from a monetization perspective as well. But no, I could not just tout a singular company right now that solves this problem. I think that will take better 24 to 36 months to have a holistic platform to do that.
What about a journalist workstation? Next generation journalist workstation?
Well, from a video editing perspective, when you're looking at the next generation, we're really starting to see people move away from installed software and moving into HTML5 platforms, so that instead of having to have every person installed in a machine and carry their video around with them, they're editing out of the cloud and they're editing on HTML5 platforms, which then can launch some workflows, not all of them, but can launch some workflows that will allow you to put things in different formats for different channels and outputs. So, as we look at the editing platforms to be able to do that, it's really moving things into an HTML5 platform so that they can be in the building and outside of the building. Because all these things that we're talking about, it's not just that we have to do them in the newsroom. We've got to be able to take this outside and do it in the field. And so now it becomes all that much more complicated unless you're doing things like HTML5 where any device you pick up can do it. If I want to do it on a Surface, I can do it on a Surface. If I want to do it on a phone, I can do it on a phone. And HTML5 allows you to do those kind of things. And from the broadcasting side of the industry, we've been a little slow getting over to that. And we're getting in that environment now so that everyone can have those platforms at their fingertips wherever they are.
Yeah, today it's more like a quiver that we had to assemble the arrows ourselves to get the various jobs done. It would be nice to get to that Swiss Army knife. But even there, I guess let's say, the rate of change out in the platform world is so great that that's always iterative. And then the Swiss Army knife is a problem because it's a blunt instrument that does everything okay. And where we see, which is back to the multi-platform jungle problem, where we see is we get the best results when we're doing platform-specific storytelling, and that's costly from a time and resources standpoint. So I don't see an easy solution, and I do wonder if we had that, the kit, how long is that kit relevant for? So half of the technological problem to solve for is the ability to be nimble and interface with the next new thing.
Well, I think the kit is only going to be as agile as the APIs they would provide for your own development teams to then build upon. Right there, to your point, there is a Swiss Army knife that it would does it do a B job across all of those channels? Yeah, probably. Could that be good enough for government work today? Yes. If you want an A+ solution, if those platforms come with robust APIs upon which you can customize to suit your own publishing needs, that's what I think you should look for in platforms that would service you in that capacity.
And we'll do one more quick question right there.
What about the environment that you work in? In my environment, it's almost a warlike environment. We have a bunch of TV stations, a bunch of media outlets, all going for clicks. And we have found that some are not honest. They're actually paying for clicks, and they want the buzz. And when you get the buzz, then people think you have the #1 clicks, you have the #1 website, and then they go to that website when it all could be a farce. And every day that I'm looking at these websites and justifying, are they real? Are they make-believe? Are they getting people paid to click on the clicks? This is in Afghanistan, believe it or not. It's very competitive. Everyone wants to be the #1 website, wants to be the #1 place for news. and we have found out that some of the competition may not play the game fairly. What are you doing? Because I know everybody in your markets wants to be number one. I'll see a news check, oh, this station in Detroit is number one. They have 2 million clicks. How do we know? Is it real?
I think that that's education for everybody, and you have to start with educating the people that work with you to look at the right KPIs that are actually showing value for the audience and for the advertiser. We have to re-educate, because everyone did get focused on a click-through rate on the advertising side, and that doesn't tell you if you're actually going to bring a customer through the door. Or that if you have brought a customer through the door. So it's about attribution and actually showing that you had the desired outcome for both either the audience or for the advertiser, and focusing on the right metrics, frankly.
Yeah, Chartbeat, their chief data scientist, talks about attention as the ultimate KPI. And think about yourself. I mean, what is the most valuable commodity we all have is our time. So I agree that it really is very easy in a newsroom to have folks get, in the way that we used to chase, the overnights, to get myopic over a particular metric or KPI, but if you really are playing the long game, the ultimate metrics are engagement and attention, and it actually is a win today, lose tomorrow. It's a bad long-term strategy to game the system. Anybody who's ever clicked on a clickbait headline, fool you once, shame on, you know how that goes, right? So you teach the audience actually not to have a sustained long-term relationship with you if you play those games. So it doesn't actually help to win today and lose tomorrow.
Okay, and with that, we must bring this to a close, not just this panel, but this conference, indeed. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank all of our sponsors for being involved. And we'd like to hear from you, your feedback on NewsTech Forum. Reach out to us at TVNewsCheck and let us know what you think, what you'd like to see for programming for next year's event. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you.